Hello, welcome back, and time for our last keynote of Data Center Live London, looking at multi-cloud strategies. Our guest is Vittorio Viarengo, Vice President Cross Cloud Services at VMware. Vittorio, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Lovely stuff. I thought we lost sound there for a second. That is the first time that's happened today, so I'm quite happy with that, and an all-virtual event. The honour is yours to close the show today. The virtual floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. My name is Vittorio Viarengo. I've been with VMware for the last 13 years on and off, and today it's my pleasure to give you a sense of what inspires our roadmap, and I'll try hard not to give you a product pitch, because I was thinking about what to present to talk about the challenges, the advantages of multi-cloud, and I realized that I really had to take a couple of product names out of our product roadmap and our product pitch, and it's really an industry-wide set of problems and solution that the industry needs to make sense of this multi-cloud. So let me dive in. We find that most customers are on this cloud journey. And many of them, for the last 10 years or so, have gone cloud first. Why? Because cloud first and the cloud is the path of least resistance for innovation. People adopted AWS initially, then Google Cloud, Azure, and everything else. And that was driven by the business unit, by developers. They wanted to, developers, they don't want anybody between them and being able to deploy code. And so they went out there and built all this front office application, but with very little governance, very little control. And then you never know, right? Sometimes every customers I talk to today, they're concerned that now they're locked into this cloud for good reason, right? They're there because they got value out of it. But the public cloud doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? Organizations still have their private cloud. That's not going away, especially now with AI. People are it's going to come back of age as people want to run their model on their own data. And then we see the emergence of edge. For the first time in 20 years, after consolidating and centralizing, for the first time we see computing moving closer to where it's used in healthcare and retail, right? Like little computer pods where it's being used. And so the picture that IT has to deal with increasingly is more and more complex and heterogeneous. But when you double click on the public cloud, it's not just one thing. It's AWS, Microsoft, Google, and now the IBM, Alibaba in Asia Pac, and Oracle are coming really strong. I call them kind of the enterprise players. They're coming really strong all over there. And in Europe especially, and Asia Pac, the emergence of sovereign clouds, where organizations increasingly want to have their data to a local provider that understands their regulations. So we find that pretty much, whether they are meeting or not, 90% or so of the customers use 2 or more clouds today. Right? The reason why I'm saying sometimes they don't admit it, because sometimes they're in denial. I talk to customers, they'll say, oh, no, we're just a one shop. We have our private cloud and AWS, that's it. Okay. And then they go, well, but the business unit is using Google. Oh, I understand. Oh, we just bought a company that's using Azure. So there you go. They have 4 clouds. And the level at which this is happening is crazy. Like the average number of applications that an enterprise has today is almost 500. And increasingly, these new applications are being built using Kubernetes and microservices, which is a whole other transformation that IT needs to deal with. And the problem with this, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? Each of these clouds brings their own way of doing, running the infrastructure, providing security, how you build applications, how you manage a lifecycle application. Even if you're using Kubernetes, there are like 12 distributions of Kubernetes. So even that's not a unifier. And then you have to connect all these different silos to a variety of different devices, whether they're corporate managed or privately owned, through networks that you don't operate. And so when you look at this is literally the most heterogeneous and complex environment that IT has ever seen, bar none. And it's not like we're going to put the worms back into the can. This is it. This is the architecture we have to deal with for the foreseeable future. And when we talk to customers, they describe that to us as cloud chaos, where everybody is on their own. Security is ephemeral, right? And because with great choice comes complexity, and you have different way of managing things. I was talking to Fortune 15 in Europe a couple of months ago, and this CIO told me, Vittorio, developers have gone crazy and built all these applications to create digital experiences for our customers in banking and insurance industry. And now the business is coming to me, the CIO, and they're asking me about cost, they're asking me about compliance, they're asking me about security, and I don't even know what the stuff is. So this is the challenge that we see many customers, they describe it to us as cloud chaos. And that's not an accident that when we ask customers what you're looking for going forward, it's like we need more simplicity. We need more consistency across these different clouds. And basically, they want their cake, they want to eat it, and they want to lose weight, right? Because they want to innovate by using the best of all each cloud, but they want to avoid lock-in. So all these requirements combined with the silo approach of these clouds create for a very complex environment. So initially we got this big boost of productivity and innovation. Now we need to deal with the cost and all this. So here's the good news. The good news is that history in IT and elsewhere repeats itself. And if you look over the years, it's always when somebody, a vendor, a consortium, open source, a standard body, really, when they come in with an abstraction layer is where things get simplified and accelerated. I'll give you a couple of three examples. Let's talk about development. Everybody understands development. Initially, to build high-performance applications, we have to write assembler. How many people can write assembler? Very few. Then we went to C and C++, and it got better, but you still have to have highly paid developers, and there are a selected elite of developers can actually write good C and C++ code. Then we went to object-oriented libraries, like, for those of you who are geeks, the MFC library, the Microsoft Foundation libraries back in the 90s allowed developers to go from writing 200 lines of code to open a Windows to instantiating a class. Great. But it's only when Visual Basic and languages like that are introduced. And by the way, this is our scale, right? Because we went from maybe a few 100,000 people that knew how to do this stuff to 5 million developers, and that unleashed tremendous productivity, because the number of developers increased dramatically and the cost of building an application went down dramatically. So abstraction, you make trade-off in terms of speed, maybe, but at the end of the day, it's worth it because you lower the cost. I'll give you another example. For those of you that were involved with application integration, remember we used to install adapters, and then literally the adapter would go in SAP and say, okay, the 15 byte, from the 15 byte to the 17 byte to the 30th byte, that's the name of the customer. So let's map it to PeopleSoft, where it's the first byte. It's nightmare. Then we went up with XML, and SOA started to get a little better. We started to get developer involved, and integration became more mainstream. And now with APIs and JSON, any developer out there with very little skill can integrate and integrate backend applications. So with a number of developers that can do this, it goes up, your cost goes down. And the ultimate example, very close to my heart, is virtualization, right? We went from having all our software tied to this disparate type of hardware to virtualization, and that increase our speed of being able to roll out things and manage things. So basically the foundation of cloud, if you will, and that's lower our costs over time with consolidation, etc., and increased level of automation. So the point is that in the multi-cloud, we need to do the same. We need to create we need a new approach to manage this complexity that abstract things and create a layer of simplification and unification. So we need to take the common things that are common across this, like everything that comes about application development, everything that is common about management, and everything that is common about data, everything that we can abstract in terms of security and posture management, and finally, in terms of how to integrate with end users and start to adopt services that the industry has been calling the super cloud. We call it cross-cloud services. I would argue that every company that is being funded and created and funded in Silicon Valley right now is a cross-cloud service company by definition, because if you're building a service for just one hyperscaler, they're gonna, at some point, they're gonna build that functionality in and you're gonna be out of business. And so there are tremendous companies out there. I can give you like 2 or 3 names. HashiCorp for infrastructure as a service, infrastructure as code, right? You have Confluent. You have Snowflake for data management, and so on and so forth. So you start to see these cross-cloud services emerging that allow you to say, hey, I'm going to put my policies in one place, and this applies consistently everywhere. So as I said earlier, I try not to give you a product pitch in this conference, and I talk to customers every day. As a matter of fact, after this conference in California this morning, I'm going to go to the office and I'm going to talk to 2 customers today that are coming to visit us. And every customer is struggling with this. If you're not struggling with this, you're going to struggle with this at some point, because this cloud adoption is unstoppable. And so I'm going to give you some pragmatic things that you can do to get ahead of this in a second. But let me quickly talk about what we do, a couple of slides, and then we go back to talk about the industry. Because of this complexity and because of the need for abstraction, it's not surprising that customers want to look at all their clouds as one and being able to operate them as one. And we believe that the solution is to apply, to use, whether it's using VMware or somebody else's, adopt cross-cloud services to solve the complexity of multi-cloud. And we believe that if you do so, you can adopt what we call a cloud smart approach. What is a cloud smart approach? The cloud smart approach is the ideal destination of your multi-cloud journey. When you look at your multi-cloud portfolio as resources, just like today you're looking at your virtualized data center as resources that you can then apply and to whatever application needs it, we want to provide the same as an industry at VMware for in the cloud. So you use whatever cloud fits the need of your application with consistent management and security control and in a cost-effective way. And so you go from disparate development and operation security environment to a single way of building applications, from a siloed infrastructure to consistent infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So that's what we do, and this is the only product slide that I'm gonna give you, and then I'm gonna go back and talk about the industry. At VMware, we saw this multi-cloud happening 5-6 years ago, and we started to build this portfolio that we call VMware Cross-Cloud Services that basically provide application management, infrastructure, security, and user access that work consistently across any cloud. Everything that we do at VMware going forward is designed so that it works across multiple clouds. And that provides that level of abstraction and simplicity that allows you to solve this problem. And as I promised, this is the one product slide in the whole deck, so I'm going to move on from that. So let me give you an example. This happens to be what we do, but you can replace us with some other vendors. I want to give you a very pragmatic example of what it means to create a level of abstraction that solves the complexity of multi-cloud. So let's talk application development. At the end of the day, if you think about it, at the core of what we do in IT is supporting applications, because applications is how we make money and how we save money, right? So when you look at the multi-cloud environment and you learn about Kubernetes, which is the system invented by Google to let any sort of average IT person or developer being able to build scalable microservices applications. Well, one would think that that's the unifier. Oh, if I adopt Kubernetes, I'm good. Turns out that there are 12 or so Kubernetes distributions. And taking a piece of code from a developer and putting it in production takes dozens and dozens of steps. Okay? So these are the things that you need to think through to simplify this environment. The first is to adopt an application platform that lays down the foundation. You need to create an application, a platform engineering team that using tools like VMware Tanzu or others, lays down any Kubernetes distribution. You need to be able to support them all, so that you tell the developers, hey, you do you. Build your microservices using Kubernetes, but you're going to deploy it on these guardrails, on this Kubernetes distribution that we make sure that are compliant, that are secure, there's the latest version, and so on and so forth. Then you need to provide them with a single pipeline, a unified pipeline that allows that relationship between operations and developers. The developers puts the code on the pipeline assembles the application, it pulls down some open source code that is needed by the application, and then feeds any Kubernetes distribution. So, for example, we have a customer called Cerner that had all their application built on AWS or Azure, I forget, and they were able to change the deployment environment to Oracle in 4 hours using this type of technology. Once you do that, instead of having to chase each of these distributions and say, okay, how do I set the policy so that developers don't consume too many resources at runtime on AKS versus EKS? No, we have a single place that allows you to put the policy once, and then the system deploys it across the Kubernetes environment and across the application. So, for example, you can say, hey, this application that treats confidential information can only talk to this microservice that have the same level of encryption. And then being able to create that microsegmentation that I just talked about and secure the whole environment and set policies like if this microservice takes more than 10 milliseconds to respond, spin a new one, and so on and so forth. So this is the idea, right? So you set your policy, you build your application, set your policy, you set your security places in one place, and then the system takes care of the various differences. Now, with that said, of course, if you have an application here that uses a Google ML APIs, there's no workaround. Somebody in IT will need to learn how to configure that part of the puzzle. The idea is that, though, is that common things in terms of application lifecycle management are done in a common way, no matter which cloud you're using. So this is an example. We happen to do this at VMware. There are other companies that provide similar services. I strongly encourage you that you do that. And sometimes I think about when I give a presentation or engage with the customers, if I were a customer, based on what I hear from all the customers that I talk to, where would I start? And I think that to start your cloud smart journey with the right foot, the first thing is visibility. You gotta know where your stuff is, right? Which cloud are you using? Let's go talk to the business unit. Let's see where they put their applications, and then let's see where the applications are and how they connect. And so look at tools. For example, VMware we have ARIA, which is a tool that allows you to get visibility across all your clouds, and so it builds you a model. Okay, this is where all my stuff is. I used to be able to do it on-prem, do my inventory. Now I need to do it across multiple clouds. The second thing is, once you know where stuff is, start to provide the management, right? Whether it's SLA management lifecycle management, and just being able to start to automate. Because automation is the name of the game. Without automation, on-prem and in the cloud, your costs are always going to be out of control. And speaking of cost, one of the things that you do once you have visibility and management is managing that cost. Every customer right now is struggling. Oh my God, I went to the cloud and now what? I get these bills. And as a matter of fact, when I was at Skyhead Networks, we were a startup funded by VC, so we have money to burn. But when we got bought by McAfee, literally our head of engineering had to come every Monday, a staff meeting, and showing that our cloud cost was going down and we could be profitable at some point in the future. So and we have at VMware, we happen to have a tool called Area Cost that allows you to do that. And once you have that visibility and management, then start to put those policies for security, starting from the infrastructure all the way up to the application. Like, for example, you want to be able to say, I want every time I create a new instance in the cloud, I want that storage to be encrypted, right? So you end up with your application open up in the cloud, and the way you do that is different from the various clouds. So look for tools that allow you to do that posture management. We happen to have one, but there are multiple vendors out there that provide similar situations. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a starting point, a framework for you to think about your journey. And this is pretty much my talk today. The world is multi-cloud, whether you like it or not. So you gotta deal with it. And the bad news is that in recent surveys that we've done, the cloud chaos is getting worse. Meaning the number of customers that are in that middle, chaos zone is increasing. And that's the bad news. The good news is that there's tremendous amount of innovation from companies like VMware and other like HashiCorp and Confluent and others that I talked about that have started to provide these services that work across clouds. And so whenever you find yourself doing things twice in different ways across multiple clouds, stop and think, should we go and start to build that abstraction layer that creates a better foundation for our future? You can learn more about what specifically VMware does in this field at vmware.com/crosscloud services. You can follow me at Care and Kick Butt on Twitter or LinkedIn. And I don't know if we have the opportunity to get questions or there are questions in the chat.
I will definitely chip in with a couple of questions if I may. The way I want to approach this, there's one that's a slightly negative question and one that's a very positive question. So just bear with me. The negative one is, there's a lot of people who are trying to move into this space, and as you described it, there is a bit of cloud chaos going on. For you, what are the common mistakes that you're seeing time and again organizations are making when they're trying to implement a multi-cloud strategy?
I think that the mistake is to stay in denial too long. There are too many companies that I talk to that are looking the other way and saying, the business unit are going there and they're happy because nobody is slowing them down, right? So developers are building applications, and as I said before, the last thing developers want to do is to have to deal with anybody that stands between their code and their code being in production, creating revenue. And so the mistake is to stay in that state of denial too long, because what that means is that, one, the next thing you're going to get is the bill shock. And the next thing you're going to hear from your business is like, you got to secure all this stuff and get on it. And now you're behind the 8 ball.
So that's a good way of looking at it. And my final question for you, and I want to look a bit further forward, is this technology, as you say, it's here to stay, deal with it. Looking a few years into the future and knowing what you know is coming, what is the thing that excites you most about where this technology can and will go in the future?
I think it's heterogeneity happens for a reason. We see it over and over again in IT, right? 20 years ago, you talk to one company and they're like, oh, we are a Sun shop. That's all we use. Well, great. Then you talk to another company and say, oh, we are an HP shop because their storage is fantastic. You talk to another company. And then what happens over the years, everybody has a little bit of everything and everything's loaded. And they do it. And in the process, they get tons of innovations, right? But then virtualization comes in and allows customers to make sense of it, move fast. Eventually, they can get the best of both worlds because you can still choose a storage that has some specific capabilities that nobody else has, and they write the plugin inside virtualization so that everybody can use it in a common way. So that was very exciting. I think if you look forward, cloud has the same potential of being able to have all these innovations, but with the advent of cross-cloud services, now you can look at your multi-cloud estate as an opportunity, as resources that you allocate to whatever the needs of your application are. Give you a great example. With the advent of generative AI, there is already a framework, an open source framework called Array, that is designed so that you can build your models across any cloud. So that's a further validation of what I've been talking about in this talk, which is the advent of cross-cloud services. And it shows you that now that we have learned a lesson, there's some of the smartest people out there, outside of VMware, outside of some of the vendors that I talk about, now we're talking about the open source community, is already thinking along the terms of hey, if AI will be a ubiquitous requirement for most applications, here's an open source framework that gives you that cross-cloud capability. So that was excites me in the future, the heterogeneity for innovation, but then this framework on top for lowering costs and going faster.
There's so much more that can still be done. Vittorio, thank you so much for your time. As much as I'd love to stop and ask you about the guitars that are behind you, we are out of time. So thank you so much for closing the event here at Data Center Live London.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for your company.